All right. Then what do I want to do? Oh, let me see. Let's make sure this bad boy is started. Looks like it has. Okay. All right. Well, welcome everyone to Volume 1 of PAS and Friends Conversations in Black, presented by the University of Louisville Pan-African Studies Department. So, welcome aboard to this very interesting conversation between us. What is the Black Studies canon? What are the indispensable texts that our students and really our people should read? Or should consume or process, we might say, but we'll get to that in a second. So what do I want to say? Welcome aboard. My name is W.S. Tequeme. I'm the Director of Graduate Studies for the Pan-African Studies Department at the University of Louisville, and I'm joined by, I'm gonna call both of you esteemed colleagues. The chair of our department, the one and only M. Brandon McCormick, and I believe this is correct, the second graduate of our PhD program, the one and only Jakia Marie. So welcome aboard, folks. Unmute yourselves and maybe, I guess, just say hello, really.
Yeah, thanks to Kwame for creating this platform and bringing this together in this conversation. I'm really excited to have it. On behalf of the Department of Pan-African Studies as the chair, welcome all you all to this webcast, podcast, whatever format this is that we're on today. I look forward to the conversation, and I'm glad that Kwame has brought us together to have this conversation as we, pose this question about canon in this particular political moment where we're thinking about the politics around Black studies and the assaults on Black studies and assaults of DEI and other initiatives that speak to our people. I think it is important to consider the kinds of texts that we're reading and why they're important for us, for our communities, for our collective liberation. So thanks again to Kwame for bringing us on. I'm looking forward to the conversation with you. I'm sure it will be lively. And with our dear colleague, Jakia Marie.
Hey, Jakia, what's happening? How you doing? Hey, let me ask a question.
I'm doing all right.
Okay. Can you all see my PowerPoint screen? Is it up?
We can.
No? You can?
I can see it. It's still on the it's not in slideshow mode. It still shows all of them down the side. So if you only want that first one to be seen.
Oh yeah, no, we good. I mean, I just wanted to make sure that was up because we're going to go through some slides as we do our thing as well. All right, I'm sorry to interrupt you, Dr. Marie, calling us or getting with us all the way from, I know you're in Ghana. Are you in Accra?
I am in Accra at the moment.
I saw you look up. What's going on?
Cars. I'm sitting outside. It got loud inside, so I had to come outside.
Okay. Well, right on. Well, let's get to it. We're glad to have people aboard for an interesting conversation. So as Brandon said, talking about canons, you know, and all that implies, right? The whole term being like an authoritative collection of texts that represent, Holy Scripture, the Bible that everybody knows. That particular collection of documents was ratified by, what was it? The Council of Rome back in 382 AD. And so here today, the Council of Louisville, right? Is going to determine the Black Studies canon for all that entails. So anyway, it should be a lively conversation. I think I need to say a couple of things. One is this is our first time through, so we might have some rough patches. Just trying to. I know it's my first time really trying to lead something like this. So forgive us if we have maybe a glitch or two as it goes on. And this is certainly something I wanted to say. The views and opinions expressed here on Pan-African Studies and Friends, Conversations in Black, do not necessarily reflect those of the University of Louisville, nor really actually even our department, Pan-African Studies. This is us, right? Now we're very wise, and they should, they should listen to us. But we're really speaking the collective today. What do I say? The Council of Louisville, that's determining the Black Studies canon today, is actually just us three people. So, but still, I think there's a lot to say. So I did that disclaimer. I want to run through a couple of these slides just in terms of just who we are for people. So the Pan-African Studies Department here at the University of Louisville goes back to 1973. So we're, as far as we're concerned, we're still celebrating our 50th anniversary. We have a undergraduate BA degree. We have a master's degree, and we have a doctoral program, a PhD degree that we offer. I don't know to what. Anyway. So that's part of who we are for people who aren't necessarily familiar. Just in terms of talking about the graduate program, just immediately for a second, since after all, I am the director of graduate studies. We are accepting applications for the fall of 2025, and what really we probably, pretty much we're gonna have to go to every other year cycle in terms of admitted. So it's really this would be the year, because it'll probably be a minute before we actually were able to get some more folks in. Anyway, there's that to say. What else is to say about us? So yeah, we've been around for 50 years, been doing different things. You may or may not. Oh man, I put some flyers of just some things we had done. There's a film series we did a few years ago. The Quebec Challenge, which the pandemic kind of wiped out. We need to bring that back, that Black History Challenge that we used to do every year. Well, this was a lively thing. The Pan-African Studies Great Debates. We did that one year. We took that idea from the John Henrik Clark House up in Harlem, New York, James McIntosh and all that gang. And they were doing that. That's where we got that idea from. We tried with this thing here. An actual comparison of of what the icons of Barack Obama and Malcolm X kind of represented, who the Black people loved the most, really, and stuff. It was an interesting conversation. Wasn't all it could have been, but anyway, just representing some of the things that we try to accomplish here in this department. That's a syllabus for like our major course, our major graduate course. A couple of flyers that I definitely wanted to get bring to everybody's attention, and we'll start distributing this stuff soon. But our next event, Volume 2 in Pan-African Studies and Friends, or PAS and Friends, Conversations in Black, Volume 2 coming up 3 weeks from today, Saturday, October the 12th. The subject is Elections, Ethnicity, and Empire, Observations on the 2024 USA Presidential Race and the Fate of Black People. We got Dr. Kyla Story, Dr. Ricky L. Jones coming aboard that time. We got one of our outstanding graduate students, Renee Richardson, down in Houston, Texas. And so anyway, that'll be Volume 2. I will say also here at the top, before we get into like actually grinding our collective Black Studies canon out, this whole series, PAS and Friends, Conversations in Black, really was built around something we really want to do in February. And so this is just a mock-up. This isn't a real flyer because we haven't filled in the details. But some of you all know Malcolm X was born in 1925, and next year, 2025, Malcolm X at 100. I mean, that's something for Black people, to honor and commemorate. And so our little part in that. So on Saturday, February 22nd, 2025, we're going to do another one of these. We're going to go all day. It's going to be like 4 sessions, 4 different panels as we contemplate, the legacy of Malcolm X. How did Ossie Davis say it? Our Black shining prince. And so there's a lot to talk about. This flyer, I mean, once we work out the program, the next couple of weeks, we'll be able to send that out. But already, I can definitely say, hey, save those dates. Save that date, Saturday, February 22nd. That'll be our really big one for the year, our big Conversations in Black, Malcolm X at 100. We may be able to do something in November on Asana Shakur's book, working on that. If that happens, that'll be in November. And anyway, those are some of the things. When we're just getting this thing started, those are some of the things that we can do, or that we will be doing this year as a part of this whole initiative, PAS and Friends Conversations in Black. All right. Well, that was the housekeeping. So where do I want to start? Let's bring our panelists back in. So I got a couple of questions for you. We're getting ready to go through our list. But first, there were 4 of us who put together a list. The list was, so there were several lists. So here's how this conversation proceeds. So everybody had the assignment of putting together 3 lists. 1 list, 25 indispensable items for a Black Studies major. Right, and it was up to everybody to determine what items went on that list. Another one was 10 indispensable items for, we phrased it a couple of different ways, a Black Studies minor, or you could frame it as 10 books that every Black person, whether they're in college or not, whether they're Black Studies major or not, needs to read. So first thing we're going to do is kind of go through our 25 item list, and then we want to collectively see if between the 3 of us, we can agree upon a 25 item list, and we'll say, hey, listen, well, this represents one attempt to establish, a Black Studies canon. We'll see how it goes. Then we're going to do the same thing with the 10 item list. If we have any more time left, we're going to do the same for the third part, what I want to say, for essential items for a master's degree in Black Studies. So we want to try to get to that one, but the 25 and the 10. So we're going to start this conversation about 25 and have people go through their lists. And so the first question that I did have for you, I asked you all beforehand. I said, well, listen, it was 4 of us. So there were 4 of us. There's 3 of us here now. But we do have 4 lists that we actually want to bring into the, discuss or make reference to. But, 4, working Black Studies scholars, each put together a list of what are the indispensable items for our Black Studies major. And I said, how many items do you think we'll have in common? And here's what I remember people saying. Jakia, I remember you saying 10 to 15 items. I remember Brandon saying, I think you said 7 items. Shelby, one of our original participants, said 8, and I said 5. And so the correct answer, we were all wrong. Anybody wanna know what the correct answer was?
Only 2.
The deuce.
Wow.
The deuce. Now, so here's the question for us. Here's the you all question, because I already know the answer. What 2? All right, since there are only 2 that we actually agreed upon, what two y'all think? What 2 y'all think that those were? I think I got my grammar right there.
Those are Black folk. I'm looking at McCormick's face to see if he put it on his list. I'm gonna go with Souls of Black folk being one of them.
No, you give me two. Give me your two, man. You can't do
Oh, I ain't
one.
got two.
Give
I
me your
got one.
two.
Shit, I
What?
thought, my bad. I thought we had like 15 in common in this too. Like, I'm clearly not going to be good at this.
Well, I agree with Jakia that Souls of Black Folks is most likely one of those two.
Yeah. And
Yep.
what's your other one? Can you give me two?
Well, I would have thought we would have had seven. 7 to 10 actually is what I said. Given that we only have two, that makes for an interesting conversation because it means that there's a lot of contestation and disagreement about what constitutes an essential text, an authoritative text, a canonical text within Black studies. And it means that Black studies scholars don't necessarily agree on that question. And maybe that's a good thing, right? Maybe I think uh, Tukweme, it's funny because you led with this biblical canon. So I happened to come to Black studies by way of religious studies,
Well, that's why. Why do you
Black
think I
religion
was
and
doing that?
culture, right? And so very well aware of the contested nature of the biblical canon and any canon in general, and that bishops, I guess you are the high priest and bishop here, Dr. Tukweme,
Yes,
uh,
sir.
to set an agenda, but not everybody agrees on what should be in it, and so I think it's important to pay attention to the ways in which canons aren't always stable, that they're always contested, that there's always politics
Uh-huh.
and power dynamics invested in canon formation. And so
This is great.
I think
This is
all of us come from different angles and perspectives, and what we deem to be the most sacred texts in Black studies, I think are going to differ from our own lenses and experiences. And so I'm glad to see that. And it makes for a more vigorous discussion amongst us. So
However, you have
maybe,
avoided the
so
question.
maybe,
This
so
is
may,
eloquent,
so,
and you
and
have
that would
absolutely
that that
avoided
would
the
that
question.
that was my wind up to Kwame to say
That
that
was a wind-up,
maybe
boy.
maybe the second text that we have in common, perhaps,
Perhaps.
is Fanon's Wretched of the Earth.
Well, guess what? You all were completely wrong. Absolutely 100% wrong. Let me show you. Can y'all see this? Can y'all read? Can y'all see it? Is it
I
too
can see.
small? So the only two that all four of us had in common were
Hmm.
the autobiography of Malcolm X and the Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson. Those are the only two we had in common. And
Interesting.
I know this is after the fact, but if I had to answer that question blind that I just asked you all, I think I might have. Well, I definitely would have got Malcolm. Uh, and if I thought about it, I might have got Carter G. I would never have said Souls of Black Folk because it wasn't on my list.
Well, see there. So there you go. So now we in this. If so, in my response just now, I was trying to guess what y'all might have said. I think I would have had Malcolm as the autobiography of Malcolm X as the other one that would have been a likely candidate for one that we would have had in common among my seven for sure, and probably among the two. But I didn't think necessarily that it would be one that my colleagues would share in common.
Oh yeah.
Malcolm X was the first one that came to my mind, but it's saying like, what does everybody else think? But I would not have said Miseducation of the Negro. I think I still would have said Souls as one of the two, just
Yeah, no,
because
I can
it
see
is
that.
oversighted at this point.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
No, and yeah, exactly. Like I say, since I was one of the members of the list, and I knew Souls went on my list, they wasn't on my list. I guess if I had been included, maybe. Anyway, let us look at collectively what our list look like. And so, like I say, this list of books here is really based on four people. There's only three of us here, part of the conversation, but just in terms of saying, okay, what would it look like when you get just this small amount of people together, four people? What would they actually just naturally agree on? All right. So all four of us did Malcolm and Carter G. Three of us did The Souls of Black Folk and Walter Rodney's How Europe Underdeveloped Africa. Neither one of those made my list for the 25. Walter, just in my defense, because this needs to be defended. Walter Rodney, I had in the master's program. So like I said, I know some Walter Rodney people might come after me. I'm just trying to say, no, Walter is absolutely essential, but I had him in the masters. So all that to say, between the four of us, those are the only four that even we had 3 out of 4. We even had 75%. Isn't that interesting?
That is interesting.
Now, let's go through the rest of it and just look at what are the titles that even 2 out of the 4 of us had. And what do we got? Is that we got 15 of those? 2 of us said Toni Morrison's, I can say that, Toni Morrison's novel Beloved. 2 of us, and both of these 2 are Brandon and Shelby, Angela Davis's Women, Race, and Class. Shelby and Jakia had with Patricia Hall and Scott book, All the Women Are White, All the Blacks. I don't remember the full title. It's on the list. We'll get back to it. But anyway, those 2 also had Sheikh Anta Diop's African Origin of Civilization. They also had Molefi Asante's Afrocentricity. Right? 2 people, Jakia and Brandon, had Booker T. Washington Up from Slavery, Frantz Fanon, Wretched of the Earth, C.L.R. James, The Black Jacobins, and Cedric Robinson's Black Marxism. Shelby and myself had Tony Cade Bombara's The Black Woman and W.B. Du Bois's The World in Africa. Brendan and myself had Black Fire. Baraka and Neil, the classic anthology of Black arts literature, artwork. We both also put Frederick Douglass's Narrative of the Life. We both had Lawrence Levine's Black Culture and Black Consciousness. And we both had There Is a River by Mr. or Reverend or Dr. Vincent Harding. We all had 25, right? We all had a list of 25. And that's the sum total of just the books that even as little as 2 of us had in common. And most of the ones that are on this list, by far, just 2 of us had in common. Now, here's what that meant to me. And this gets back to Brandon's point. And it's one reason why I also, like I say, we talked about this canon business. I got, just for the record, really the notion of a Black Studies canon. I must admit, I had not thought about it before I read the Fabio Rojas book, From Black Power to Black Studies. And in one of those later sections, he's doing he did some surveys, and he did a survey. Okay, what are the established texts? What is the canon? And actually, that would be relevant here. I don't remember. I think Souls of Black Folk certainly had the lead, so it's no surprise that you all mentioned it. But as I looked at that list, I was going like, man, there's only like 2 of those books that are particularly, essential to me, and it got me on that question. So anyway, back to the point, the fact that we sat up together, 4 of us from different generations, right? 3 different generations, I think. And we had actually, I think, all on the whole, relatively little in common. To me, it just establishes the point, the one point, which is that, the Black Studies field is so vast that to really speak of a canon, does actually put us in this sort of situation. Well, really, if you want to talk about what an indispensable text, look at 4 of us, 3 of us in the same department, 1 of us graduated from the doctoral program in the same department. Look what we got, and so the first thing is certainly a worthy conversation, but the first thing is to say, really, the field is so vast that really you can't really, it's really difficult to talk about a canon. Is there a history canon? There's a canon, there's a canon of colonial U.S. history. There's a canon of 20th century. There's a canon of Europe. So in these subfields might have canons, but is there a history canon? You know what I mean? And black studies, it really is like that. It is so vast, right? The study, the exploration of experiences of people of African descent, the need to deconstruct, centuries of European, racist, scholarship, and teaching and education. We have a vast, field encompassing not only history, history of multiple regions, the Caribbean, Africa, America, but also culturally, just in terms of talking about whatever domain, arts, music, literature. And so, uh, uh, it would be a difficult proposition. It would be a difficult I mean, we're going to go ahead with our exercise, but like I say, what we immediately find out is, oh, really, if you really look at this thing, it'll be something difficult. I'm going to stop after just this last point, which is to say, this was just the four of us from the same department. Imagine if we had a real Council of Louisville where we actually had mugs from around the country, et cetera. Imagine. All right, I'm going to stop just because, I'm going to stop. So, y'all, any other reactions before we actually go to people's specific lists?
Well, I do want to say that one thing to add is that even though we have, once we get into the list, we'll see, but even though we have different books, we do have a lot of the same authors and the same scholars, right? So even at the micro level, there's variation, right? Beloved, The Bluest Eye, right? But is it Toni Morrison, right? Do we think that Toni Morrison is significant enough to be in this canon? So I think that even at a larger level, maybe even talk about who do students need to know about, what do students need to know about, and then the details about which avenues do we go down to teach this, right? And I think that in a lot of these ways, some of these books work, a number of books can achieve that same goal. So I think that can nuance the conversation also if we look at the not just historical figures, but the scholars that we want students to learn from and the overall information we want students to learn.
And if I could just add to what Jakia said, and I think that's helpful to say that there is overlap and dissonance, in the respective lists that we've offered, and where we see the confluences here in this slide here, in terms of authors, but also in terms of themes and/or subject matter, right? And so, as you just mentioned, Kwame, this is a exercise in futility and trying to create 25 texts out of a broad, right? Over centuries of Black thought and over various regions and subdisciplines, there's no way that one could ever come up with a list of 25 texts that would be sufficient, to ground one in in Black thought. And even if we were to expand out into reading lists for comps for graduate students. And, when I was in graduate school, we probably had a list of 300 books that we were supposed to be accountable for whatever our sub-discipline was in religion. And if you were to do that for Black studies, it would still be, insufficient. But what we do have here is, to Jakia's point, not just about authors, but there is history. There are significant texts in history, right? Groundings in history. So you and I, Kwame, both have There Is a River, right? Which is speaking to a kind of broad history of Black struggle in the United States. We both have Black culture and Black consciousness, which is to say that not just about history, but there is something about culture that becomes important, and not just high elite intellectual culture, but as Lawrence Levine is talking, folk culture or folk thought, the thought of the folks, of the people, right? And so we both have, and I would say that there are other texts that speak to that reality, to get to know something about that. Black Fire is about literature and literary history. We all have Black women authors on there, right? And saying that there's something essential about Black women's scholarship and voices that we need to pay attention to in Black studies, unless we reify the worst of canon formation, right? As we talk about Black studies itself as a kind of critique of the Western European canon that was all a white male body of knowledge, as if white men were the only important thinkers that educated people should reckon with. And so as Black studies comes up as a critique of a Eurocentric canon, when we establish a Black canon, we don't want to be guilty of reestablishing a patriarchal Black studies canon. And we know too often Black studies has been guilty of that very thing. And so we may not have agreed on the sisters who should be on our particular list, but we all know, hey, Angela Davis needs to be on there somewhere. Probably Audre Lorde needs to be on there somewhere, right? Anna Julia Cooper needs to be on there somewhere. We got seminal figures, right? And we can get down into more contemporary thinkers, but those are thematic things. Then I would say we got something about diaspora on there, right? You got to contend with scholars outside of the U.S., whether it's Walter Rodney, whether it's Frantz Fanon, right? Whether it's C.L.R. James, whether it's whoever the thinkers are, we're all very clear that we have to be attentive to the continent and to the diaspora if we're going to do justice to the breadth of Black thought. And so, whereas it may seem that we don't have much agreement, in other ways, maybe we actually do in some significant ways.
Good points. Good points. Good points, both of you. And then, no, we good. We good. I was going to do some more saying, hey, some of these items that I wasn't on, they were on other aspects. They were on my graduate list, but I don't need to do that. So, all right, cool. All right, so then our job then, the fun part of this exercise was, all right, we each had our list. Now, can we collectively come to some agreement? I mean, so if there was actually to be some sort of official aspect, that it would be a negotiation of like people with different, views of things as well. So then the heart of the exercise today for me is like, can we collectively build a list out to 25? And so for the purposes of the conversation, I'm going to go ahead.
Why did you choose 25? Just for the sake of conversation, it was just an arbitrary number. Did you just say 25? Could have been 30, could have been 50, could have been 10. Why did you choose 25?
A more manageable number than 50.
Okay.
50 becomes a real difficult conversation to like have in like a 2-hour conversation. 25 is in the realm. So yeah. So even though I did not vote for Souls of Black Folk or Walter Rodney as a part of the 25, as a part of us getting to 25, we're going to put those on. That 3 out of 4 of us, we're down for that one. So we'll put that on the list. And so now, well, actually, there's 2 parts to this. So the first part actually is to go back and have you all talk about your list for a couple of minutes, what you were trying to achieve. Some of it I think you may have already said, but still, what were you trying to achieve with that list? Maybe highlight an item or 2 or something like that, just to give people a sense of, hey, here's your vision of like what would be some indispensable texts. We'll do that. We'll go through that. Then we'll get to the point where let's see if we can build out a list collectively. And we'll do that by, we got the 4, so that means 21, we more have to account for. So we'll go through 5. Okay, we'll go to your list and you give us 5, and then we'll see if we can achieve unanimity on those 5. And we'll go around and we'll see what the list looks like, and we'll build that up to 25. Hopefully we'll be critical, but what's the word? Constructive, as we try to collectively build out the list. So, I guess one other point I would make. So we do the list. What we found is that, Brandon, you were the one who had most in common with everybody else. You had 14 titles that appeared on other people's lists. Shelby and Jakia, you all had 11. And I had the fewest, which will come as no surprise to Brandon, certainly.
Not
Zero surprise.
I got to give y'all that one. And so then we'll start with Mr. Unity, Dr. McCormick.
Yeah. Well, So I'd be curious. So the 14 that I had in common with other folks, those might be ones that may be mostly obvious, I think, from what we've seen. Um,
Now, what were you trying to do with your list? If you could say that succinctly.
well, so again, I began from the place, even in this in our initial set of email exchanges, that as a Black Studies scholar and a scholar of religion, I'm suspicious of canons, right? And so the first and foremost, thing that I wanted to do was to engage in an exercise of texts that are important, that bear witness to enduring and lasting insights and truths about Black life, but that don't get trapped into a kind of false orthodoxy that don't allow us to, expand our horizons and knowledges, right? And so there were certain, I think, texts that I might assume would be on certain folks' canon that I just some that I think were important to include, but some that I thought might be included that I was sure to avoid because I wanted to contest, our canon. And then there were others that I wanted to include that I was fairly sure probably wouldn't be on anyone else's list, but I wanted to make a case for them, not as essential and indispensable, but to say that these are really important conversation areas within Black studies that we impoverish ourselves by not paying attention to. So if I were to talk, so for instance, if I go to number 10 and I say James Cone, Black Theology and Black Power, I was almost sure that that's not going to be on anyone else's list. But I think it was an essential conversation, not simply because I'm a scholar of Black religion, but because I think that religion is essential to having a conversation about Black studies and Black life in the US and throughout the diaspora. And interestingly enough, text on Black religion or Black religious thought tend to be absent from many canons, as it were, of Black studies or even anthologies of Black studies that we see. Of course, if you take it back to a kind of originary kind of textbook in Black Studies, Karinga's Intro to Black Studies, Karinga has, Black religion as kind of an essential category within Black Studies, but so many other texts don't. And so as a way of being provocative and a bit ornery, I think to go through a Black Studies program and not know who James Cone is, especially in a moment of resurgent white Christian nationalism, not to know that authors like James Cone established a tradition of thinking Black religion and Black Christianity in particular otherwise in ways that were radical and oriented toward Black liberation, I think is to do ourselves a disservice. So I wanted to include a text like that for a reason, just like that. Likewise, something like Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider, to come from a Black woman who is writing from a queer lens, and also to put that together also with Black queer studies, a critical anthology by E. Patrick Smith, is a text that I presume probably wouldn't have been on other folks' lists. But I think if we're talking about Black studies in the 21st century, or we're not including, right, those voices within Black communities that are traditionally marginalized and others, and I think we're doing ourselves a disservice in an impoverished understanding of what the Black experience includes. So I wanted to include some texts like that and ways of disrupting what might be a taken for granted Black studies canon. Right. And then there were just other texts that I thought were either interesting to me or just representative of something. So, like, in other words, Amy Cesaire's Discourses on Colonialism. That may or may not be an essential text for Black studies, but it is essential, I think, that we are thinking about colonialism, right? Thinking about the impact of that globally, and within the US. So I think if we're going to be serious about Black studies, we need to be reading an author like Amy Cesaire, right? So there were that was a kind of rhyme and reason. Given that I don't necessarily believe in canon,
Right.
what are some texts that I could put on here that I think are quite important, essential, or representative of the kind of thinking that we should be doing in Black studies?
I love hearing anybody mentioned discourse on colonialism and M.A. Césaire. He didn't make my list because I had him, once again, I had him in the master's program, but I got a shout out to my man, M.A. Césaire, although I never know if I'm pronouncing his name correctly. Good stuff. Jakia, let's move to your list and, give us a couple of minutes on like what you were trying to accomplish as you put your list together.
Wait a minute. There's 30 titles on this list. So right off the top, Jakia is being disruptive of the project, which I can appreciate. But if I had known we had that freedom, to Kwame.
Well, I mean, but that's the thing about freedom. That's the thing. Yes, exactly. You got it. If you got to ask permission, then you ain't got no freedom. Jakia, before you get started, I pulled this picture of you off the internets, and what is this you got in your hand?
It's a plaque.
Oh, come on!
It's a plaque.
I knew that.
No. Yeah.
No, you gotta tell us what it is.
Yeah, so that's from March of this year, and I was at the National Council for Black Studies, and they recognized me as a upcoming scholar and activist in Black Studies. So I want to make sure I get the name. It's a long title, the award. So it's a very long title.
Okay.
So yeah, the award was the Mary McLeod Bethune and Carter G. Woodson Award for Outstanding Service in the Promotion of Social Responsibility in Africana Studies.
Well, there you go. Congratulations.
Very long name, but thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Congratulations. Yeah, exactly. And once again, I mean, hey, and that's reflecting good on us because we taught you.
Sure did. Y'all raised me.
Although I must add, let me come back here for a second. I did notice this. So me and Jakia are tight, but we had the least in common of any of the four of us. We only had those two books in common, and that was it. And that's my girl over there. And what else I want to say? But that also illustrates, that's one thing she did when she got this degree. You know what she did? She skillfully avoided taking classes with me. And that's why you ain't got more of my items on your list. Well, I'm done.
It's like we had the most in common, I think.
Yeah,
Jackie and I.
We did. And I was his TA as well.
Yep, that's right.
Yep.
That's right.
Purely happenstance.
Man, you should be getting influenced by other people, man. He's all right, but there's some other people you could have some intellectual influence from.
So I would say that with my list, my focus was, you saw here, I put like Notes of a Native Son or Go Tell It on the Mountain by James Baldwin. I'm like, James Baldwin.
Exactly.
What I was really looking at was not only was African American thought, because that's where Black Studies was founded, but not solely focused in the US, since I'm thinking about Black Studies, Africana Studies, Pan-African Studies, not just African American Studies. So I wanted to have a little more breadth as far as subject matter is concerned. I think so. That's why you see C.L.R. James and Kwame Nkrumah, Walter Rodney, right? I wanted to expand that thought a little bit. The other piece too is that I added texts that aren't as old as some of the other ones, right? So I thought that the new Jim Crow, since we're making this canon in 2024,
right,
we can bring in the new Jim Crow, and the same thing with like the 1619 Project. So that's kind of what I was thinking. I think that if we had a specific time frame, this list would have looked a little different, but I wanted to add a few more contemporary books because they so eloquently look at or explore, examine, interrogate these topics in a contemporary manner, right? That I think some of the other books, I mean, they just couldn't. So that's how I was looking at this. And then I also was thinking about some of my students and questions that they ask,
Hmm.
like what's important to students as well, which is why I have like powernomics, right? Black reparations.
Uh-oh, you froze. And the sound was actually a little shaky too, so I don't know. I don't know if there's a connection issue all the way across the waters, but you definitely have frozen and are now silent as well. So I hope we get you back soon. I know if I'm looking at this list, once again, we only had two in common in terms of the 25, but in terms of like the larger thing, we talked about like text for a graduate program. Then, you and I will have a number of things in common. And in some cases, um, if we don't have the book in common, we might have the author in common. All right. Well, I hope our girl comes back to us. Um, so I think I'll just have to go, and when she gets back in, maybe we'll maybe we'll get her back in. I mean, she covered some of it. Um, I did want to talk to Jakia about some of these items on her list, though, like 2000 Seasons by Aikwe Arma. Is she back?
It looks like she's waiting in the lobby to be admitted.
Okay. She back
Welcome
with
All
back.
us.
right. Yeah. Anyway, so I
Takwame
was
was
also
talking badly about you while you were gone, and so now you're
oh
back to defend yourself.
yeah, no. It's cool. I know it's all love. So that was kind of my thing. Was I was also thinking about some more broader books, right? So like Reversing Sale, looking at the Black diaspora
Yes.
is a broader text. So we don't have to have the individual like 5 individual books. I can just have this one. I think similar to what McCormick did, add in some more anthologies to the
Uh-huh.
to the text as well.
Hey, Jakia, your sound is kind of shaky.
Okay, let me figure this out and I'll come right back.
Okay, okay,
So to claim, if you want to go to your list, I'll come back.
okay. All right, all right, all right. Well, let's do that. All right, third version. My list. All right, there's my list. All right, what was I trying to do? I had this notion of trying to provide a certain amount of coverage or some degree of coverage of subject matter that I thought was important. And even in the 25, and like so I just kept going, but I still, it's hard. I wasn't mad at Jakia Brandon for going to 30 because it's hard. It's hard. So it's hard for me too. But like I said, I do have a clear, cutoff for 25. But anyway, coverage of issues or themes or major aspects of the Black experience, I wanted to make sure they were covered. So I want to say, even at the outset, before I kind of run through this, is that was light on history. Went through it and it was light on enough history. And then, so here's how I sold that to myself. I said, well, we're writing indispensable text for a Black Studies major, right? Well, if you got a Black Studies major, you got to take African American History 1 and 2. Pretty much, maybe not 2 units, but I don't think there's a single department, right, in the whole country that doesn't actually have a history course there as well. And so I was going like, well, I was like, man, I don't think Charles Hamilton Houston's name is in any of these texts here, and if so, it's only once. I was like, and then there's some other things that should have been, I mean, like I say, so it's light on history. I'll say that from the outset. You know, I originally, for that reason, I put in a book that I'm not even sure if I own. And I know I've actually, no, I can't say that. I may have used it once, years and years ago, From Slavery to Freedom by John Hope Franklin. I had that on the list originally just from the standpoint of history, right? I mean, okay, we do need some basic history, but even though it's not necessarily a text, like I say, that I particularly use, it's certainly valuable and worth having and everything. But I eventually subbed out that for Vincent Harding, There is a River, which is also about history, although it only goes up to what, the Civil War or just after the Civil War. But you know, it has a whole different approach there as well. So anyway, I wanted to say that on the top there, I said, hey, wait a minute, they got to take a history class. When I looked at the list that I came up with, you could see what my concerns were. So like what? The first 6 items on the list really concern that whole Black uprising of the 50s, 60s, and 70s, of course, with the autobiography. All right, we were talking about like text in the students should read. Yeah. So I ended up putting a lot of like visual stuff in here. So very high on the list of something that I would definitely want, Black Slaves major, certainly to be familiar with this classic and great, what is it? Something on the order of like 14-hour documentary series on the civil rights / Black Power movement. Eyes on the Prize. They did it in 2 versions. That's, to me, yeah. For me, that's an indispensable text. Anyway, still the civil rights movement, right? Claiborne Carson, that's the history of SNCC, absolutely indispensable. Ann Moody's Coming of Age in Mississippi, that's a classic. Once again, it's a story of that generation. Most of the book, even though she goes on, and the last part of the book is about her activities in the civil rights movement. Most of the book is actually about, well, like the title says, what it really means to grow up in the 1940s and 50s in Mississippi as a poor Black person, as a poor Black woman in particular. So many people are familiar with the civil rights movement and still really don't know that name, Robert Williams. So I put his book on, Negroes with Guns, from the same, kind of some of the same thinking that you were doing, Brandon, in terms of, hey, let's put on some stuff here that certainly is not really making the cut, but is really also absolutely critical. And so anyway, for all the familiarity that like some people claim to have about the civil rights movement, that is really even still today, a story that so few people know about. And then The Black Woman by Toni Cade Bambara. Yes, women talking, but it's also really an indispensable text of the Black Power movement. The subject really is the Black Power movement. The subject is the Black liberation movement and how to effectively wage it, how to include women and how women can do that. It's not just about the women's perspective, but it's an indispensable text on women, indispensable text on people trying to theorize about what Black power, what the Black liberation movement actually meant back in 1970. So anyway, I looked at it and I said, well, there's a whole chunk of stuff that's really on one particular, period in time. What else did we do in here? Like I said, I had to get a little bit of history in there. So another book, man, I think everybody should know this book, Celia a Slave by Melton McLaurin, a story of this girl who grows up in Missouri, ends up getting hung for killing her rapist master. Anyway, so quite a story, tells you almost everything you need to know about the institution of slavery in the United States. All right. Anyway, let me stop doing one by one. A little history, white by law in there, because something that's indispensable in terms of people really being aware of certainly this American thing is how these people invented race, how they invented and maintained race. We came into being as Black people, as African American people, like under the power and the pressure of a white supremacist system. So it's something worth having some understanding of. So I use White by Law in there. There's some other texts that one could also use. You know, Brandon already talked about a little bit about Black culture and Black consciousness. So I think you all also talked about kind of, you know, it's not just the United States. We want to be diasporic. And so a couple of films, Sugar Cane Alley, you know, I know a lot of people have heard me talk about that film. It's something everybody needs to see. Colonialism in the Caribbean in the mid 20th century, a story, you know, so little know about. Quilombo takes us back to the 1600s, and another film takes us back to the 1600s and independence of Black Maroon society and their struggle against the Portuguese. Had to get some literature in there, had to get some humanities in there. So we led with Anne Petrie, I never know how to pronounce this woman's name. Her classic novel, The Street. Put the Langston Hughes Reader in there. That's a book I don't even possess because I got all this other stuff, right? But like, you know, that's the collection, right? The poetry, the simple, the essays, the excerpts from the novels. So anyway, Langston Hughes, right? I mean, also then what? You know, Lorraine Hansberry, To Be Young, Gifted, and Black, that collection of her writings, plus the movie that was made out of her famous play, Raisin in the Sun, the original one, the original 1961, not the one that is Brandon's favorite from about 2005, featuring Puff Daddy, or what's his name now, Sean Combs,
Hey, man,
in the Sidney Poitier role.
He is.
But I say go to the
anathema.
original. Don't go to the one that Brandon likes, the one with Puff Daddy, P. Diddy, Sean Combs playing Walter Lee. Don't do that.
No Diddy at this moment.
We
Brother
talked
Combs.
Yeah, no, for real. We talked about Black Fire. Well, you talked about Black Fire, anthology of the Black Arts Movement. This is close. I think Chimamanda Adichie's short story collection, "The Thing Around Your Neck," is probably one of the most contemporary things on my list. Miseducation of the Negro. Blues People by Amiri Baraka. So, you know, music, well, not obviously, but, you know, I pay a little bit of attention to music. So you can see that. I threw in a film I knew no one would have, Heartland Reggae, the 1980 film documentary on roots reggae music. I also put in something that's not even particularly a text. I wrote a curated Coltrane and jazz YouTube playlist, which doesn't actually particularly exist. But I tell you what,
can I intervene right here if you don't mind? But here's what I think. Here's what I think is really interesting about what you've done here. And again, and I appreciate it because, like Jakia transgressed the assignment by including 30 instead of 25, and you have too. But what you did here was
I got 25.
You got 29. You
got 25.
It goes to 29. Hoop Dreams down here, 1994.
That's just it. That's it. I was gonna stop.
Yeah, but I guess my point is, if you look down at Hoop Dreams, you have a number of films on here, right? Which the assignment seemed to have called for essential text, which
a film is text.
We take for granted as books, right? And right. A film, you're absolutely right. A film is a text, and so that when we start talking at that register about essential films, essential documentaries, the Eyes on the Prize absolutely is essential viewing. I remember as an undergraduate, I'm not sure if it was PAS or not that put it on, but certainly the University of Louisville in Thrust Theater and our student center would have a week-long just showing, just all day long would just show episodes of Eyes on the Prize, and students would come and gather and watch that. We could certainly bring that back. But it is to say that, as we already talked about, the expansiveness of the field and how much literature there is in Black studies to actually need to be familiar with and aware of and accountable for as scholars, when you start adding in essential films, essential documentaries, essential music, essential recordings, essential interviews, when you think about, say like James Baldwin and Nikki Giovanni in conversation in that classic interview. I mean, I think that's something that everybody should watch, right? But I mean, that just really expands what we're talking about in terms of kind of essential knowledge to consume, whether that be in text or not, which again is a disruptive move within Black studies, within a Eurocentric canon that can only privilege the written text in an African derived culture that has been so highly oral, right? And so, do we think about, again, the visual and the oral and the musical as essential or canonical texts that we need to be accountable for as scholars? So I really
We
appreciate what
should.
is doing in there. But again, because that's what you do primarily is film and music and culture, you bring that lens to a canon, in a way that I might not bring that lens to a canon, in a way that a historian might not bring that lens to a canon, but we appreciate that you did it. And so that just goes back to the point that all of us, have different emphases based
Mhm.
upon our perspective, and interest within Black study.
Mhm. Right on, man. Right on. Just a couple more items there. I mean, so Daphne Duval Harrison, Black Pearls, Blues Queens of the 1920s. So, like I say, kind of a music section we see there. And I guess so I don't have the Souls of Black Folk on the list, but The World in Africa is to me an indispensable text. Um, and that certainly like gives us a history of Africa up until about 1960 or so. So yeah, without a doubt, W.B. Du Bois has to be, I think, on any sort of list there as well.
Would
But
you care to offer a 30-second just rationale for why you left Souls off?
okay, I'll do that after I finish this list because I did want to mention the historical novel by Maurice Condé, Segu. I mean, she was from where Guadeloupe in the Caribbean, and anyway, blah blah. But she writes a story that puts us in the seven. It's a saga. It puts us in the 1700s and 1800s in Bambara country in West Africa, and as a chronicle of the immense cultural change that takes place during that time, and something that certainly speaks to the questions of religion and religious differences and the role of like what religious conquest in history. It's an indispensable text for me. So I just wanted to, that's a quick run through, but I would love to entertain your question about souls of Black folk. Um, well, I mean, sure. I mean, I'm glad everybody reads it, and Mr. Not Mr. Dr. Du Bois is very eloquent. Um, Really, I mean, there's the phrase that everybody mentions, double consciousness. Well, let's do that for a second. So, I mean, I find it very unpersuasive. Uh, but many people cite it as like, oh no, this is really gets close to defining the Black experience. And that like I said, that's the most often quoted phrase there as well. What there's the chapter on Booker T. Washington, and that's important. That's certainly an important part. That's not the whole story of the Book of Washington, but that's an essential text in examining that period of history. And so it's, that's an important essay. A few people cite that last chapter. It's an interesting, what's the word, and important and early, because the book comes out in 1903. What's the word? Championing of the quote unquote Negro spiritual. As evidence of Black humanity and superior artistic achievement. So that's certainly something that important, in terms of tracking African American intellectual history. But actually, it's not an indispensable text to me unless we want to focus on W.B. Du Bois. Uh, I guess I put a question out there at top, and until Jakia, she need to get back in here soon. but since it's with you and me here, I mean, so okay, yeah. Now I'll just change the question and put it on you.
Uh-oh.
Why is Souls of Black Folk like an essential text for you? Not to say why is it an important and useful text, but why is it an essential text for you?
Well, right. I mean, and again, it's a fraught question around canon, what we mean by canon, whether or not a text is essential versus indispensable. But I do think there is something enduring about Souls of Black Folk. I think it is a oft cited text for good reason. I think it establishes a certain kind of discourse within Black intellectual history, and that I think that students it yields dividends for students to return to that text, even if they need to contest it and disagree with it, right? So
Okay.
I think to be conversant with the notion of double consciousness, even if one finds it ultimately unpersuasive. I think to be conversant with the notion of the talented tenth, even if one finds it ultimately unpersuasive, and obviously we should contest that notion of the talented tenth, but a whole tradition of Black racial uplift in many ways is built upon it, right? And traditions of Black activists and intellectual work built around ideas like that.
Okay.
Um, for me,
Let me.
as someone in religion, right, it is one of the foundational texts of writing about Black religion in America. And so for me, again, we as scholars in religion would certainly move past Du Bois, but it's important to take him up, to read him, to reckon with him as a foundational writer in a kind of Black intellectual tradition. And so for me, that's why he appeared on the list. And I don't disagree with you that certainly there are folks who are unpersuaded uh, by some of his writings in that particular text, as I'm sure Jakia, as she comes back on screen,
We got it back.
will want to articulate her own displeasure with Du Bois on many fronts. Um, but that might be all the reason more to read him, right?
Okay.
So
Hey,
that
let
one
me.
can clearly articulate one's point of contestation.
So, do you have double consciousness? Are you riven in two by the fact that you are an American and also a Negro?
Well, I think we have multiple consciousnesses, and I think there are always various lenses through which we are viewing ourselves
But is that a yes
at
or a
any
no?
given time.
Is that
It
a yes or a
is
no?
it is a it is a contestation of the question, and whether or not I have double consciousness is not material to whether or not I feel like people should read Du Bois about double consciousness.
Okay. All right. Jackie, are you active again? Are you with us?
I'm here.
Okay, good, 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 good. No, it's good to have you back, man. I was a little worried, with you being,
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
way
yeah.
over there. I was a little bit worried. So I'm glad to have you back. Well, let's see. We kind of gone through my list. I tell you what, where we are now with the time and such, my original scheme of us. Well, no, let's do it a little bit. Let's let's. So now we're kind of improvising, kind of based on the time. So we kind of went through our list. So we said we were going to try to compile collectively a list of 25. And so, well, let's try it.
Let's see
So,
what we
so
can do. I got about 20 minutes
I
before
know,
I got to jump off. So let's see what we can get at here.
I
And I'm
know, I
gonna
know.
agree with McCormick in that, like, a lot of these books we may not completely agree with, but that doesn't mean that they should be completely taken out of whatever this canon is. I think because a lot of the works here, especially the older works, they speak to a generation, they speak to a certain time, and that context is important for understanding the significance of black studies, but then also the significance of African people on the global level.
Right.
Uh,
I mean, so for that, for on that same logic, Booker T. Washington's Up from Slavery. I certainly am not a Washingtonian. I don't, subscribe to Booker T's ideas here, but I think it's very important to have read Booker T. Washington so that one can clearly understand, his perspective and point of view, so that we can contest it and better understand a contemporary strain of Black neoconservatism, which in many ways builds upon some of the logics that Booker T sets out, over a century ago. Which, if you look at a list that I have on another list there that we probably won't have time to get to, I put John McWhorter's "Losing the Race." Now, John McWhorter is a contemporary Black neoconservative who I
yeah,
have no affinity for in his ideas, but I do think it's important that Black folk reckon with his writings, right, to understand the ways that those perspectives become influential in contemporary culture wars.
Okay, what
So
kind
for
of
me,
you?
agreeing with a person's perspective is not requisite to whether or not I think they should be read. So that's the only
Oh,
point I'm making here.
no, that's useful. That's useful. That's useful. But I think rather a different issue from saying, can we collectively put together a canon? I mean, none of us would. I mean, none of us would ever be asserting that, like, if we were able to come up with a list, that would mean that was all that anyone should ever read. It's not really about that at all. So to your point about, hey, one needs to be conversant with like a great deal that's going on in the world. Yes, absolutely. And our attempt to create a little list here, I don't think, contradicts that to any particular degree. Well, I tell you what. I'm trying to improvise just based on our time scheme in terms of what we need to, what we would best, how we would best go about this. Well, um, all right, well, let's try to give us a few minutes. All right, all right. I want each of you all to propose 5 items from your list and see if it gets past this full Council of Louisville, which is a council of 3. So, McCormick, since you had the list that shared the most with other people, you pick 5 and see if you can get past the Council of Louisville.
Well, so I think you've already you started the list there, and you got 4 titles on
Yeah,
that
yeah,
list
yeah.
already. And I
Right. We're going
think
with the ones we
all
already had in common.
4 of those were already on my list.
Yes, they are. So
Um,
it's a whole different list.
so I mean, I think that really speaks well to my prowess as the bishop here in the Council of Louisville establishing this canon. No,
Okay.
no, I think so. So it's interesting here
Hey man,
that
you got to
that
leave in 20
that
minutes. We
those
ain't got
4.
time for
What
all these
and
preambles.
you went back off of my list, so I need to
Oh,
pull it up
oh,
on the
you want?
split screen.
All right.
But again, my thinking and my politics around canon are such that, again, I'm suspicious of the politics and the power dynamics, which means then that those 4 titles that you already have on the master list from my list are all male authors. And so let me produce something that's outside of that logic because it's
Okay.
necessary. All right. So
Sounds good.
if I'm looking outside of that patriarchal list that is forming. um, let me go here with Beverly Guy Sheftall's Words of Fire. It's an
Jakia, you
anthology.
approve? You approve, Jakia?
Oh yeah, I definitely approve.
Okay. That's one. Give me
It's
another one.
an it's an anthology. So is that now is am I at
Nope.
5 having
Beverly.
given that one?
No, you're at 1, man. You're at 1. What
Oh,
are you
okay.
talking about? We
Well,
already got a
I
list of
thought those
4.
other 4 I thought those other 4 were already on my list, so that was constituting part of the 5.
Oh, you're trying to get out of here early. That's what it is. That's what it is.
Well, okay.
Man,
If
that's
that's the
that's
case,
that's how
okay.
students behave. You doing that thing that students do. Oh, I didn't know I had to answer every question. Anyway, you go ahead. You go ahead
All right.
before I go off.
Let me offer that as one. Number 2, I'm gonna offer Fanon's Wretched of the Earth. I think it has been indispensable reading for generations of Black scholars and activists in and outside of the academy. Um, I think it also moves us outside of the United States. And I think that all Black studies scholars should, in some ways, reckon with Fanon.
Do you
So
approve, Jakia? Do you approve of that?
Definitely.
Because that was on your list too, wasn't it?
Yeah.
All right, all right. See, only reason I'm being super liberal here is because we're running out of time.
okay, run me back to my list.
I
If I
would
got to
love
get 3
to. I
more.
would love to actually talk about Fanon a little bit more, but you got to go do your parental duties. Give me something else.
All right, run me back to my list so I can see. So that's my 2 of 5 here. Um,
What about Harriet Jacobs? You want to go with that? Women, Race, and Class. You want to go with that?
I'm gonna go for 3. Sure, let's go Jacobs. Let's go Jacobs here. Incidents in the Life of a Slave Girl. I think it's one of the classics. I think it gets us into the genre of slave narratives. I think which is an important genre to have on the list. And then again, it also complexifies our notions of the interlocking systems of race and gender, sexuality,
I
power.
punched that in, Jakia, without even getting your approval.
I'm okay with it.
You okay with it? We're being super liberal just because you got to go. If you was
Yeah.
here until 8 o'clock, we'd be pushing back a little bit. Go ahead.
I'm sure you would. I'm sure you again. And then I'm gonna have to go with Robinson's Black Marxism and the Making of the Black Radical Tradition.
I'm voting that down.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Absolutely what? Voting it down or up?
No, absolutely add it to the list.
Oh, no. See, everybody's got veto power, so it's not making the list. I'll tell you why. Actually,
Everybody got veto power?
Yeah, everybody has veto power. It's got to be you. Well, yeah. I'll tell you why. No disrespect to Dr. Robinson. But for an essential text for a Black Studies major, no. Because I taught that with a graduate class and not a single one of us understood it. And that includes me. So I'll just stop there and say, it's only that reason. I'm sure it's deep, and I'm sure because a lot of people cite it and everything and all of that. But I'm voting it down. I'm saying if you want to use it, you got to save it for the doctoral program. Certainly not for an undergraduate. That's my reasoning.
That's fair. That's still 4 for me. So I don't have to put another one up in its place. I put up 4. You voted 1 down. So I only got to get 1 more.
You're exactly right.
Yeah. Run me back to my list.
Run you back to.
And I'm gonna give you this 5th one.
Yep. Man, come on now. You got 3 seconds to choose, and then you're gonna lose your place. Jakia, do them a countdown from 3.
3.
Let's go Black Fire.
2.
Rock and Neil Black Fire.
I'll vote for that one. That's on my list. Jakia, what are your thoughts about this Black arts movement anthology from like 1968? Way before you was even born.
Yeah, I honestly don't even know if I've ever even read it, but I'm okay with it. Y'all say so. I trust you.
Oh man, see, that's not how we're supposed to be doing this. This is liberalism.
But it gets us into the Black Power era. It gets us into literary movement. It gets us into the Black arts movement. I think it's a essential text.
Well, let me see. This is the first thing that appears on the text that actually falls in the realm of, what do you call it, like literature, creative writing. Everything else is like a historical or essays. Yeah. So,
See,
I mean, we certainly need, well, anyway, I don't even need to say it. Jakia, you got 5. You got 5 candidates. So let's see if you can do better than this guy who was trying to get the first 4 that everybody had agreed in as part of his 5. Let's see if you're going to deal with it straight instead of this guy.
So I think fundamentally, from Black Power to Black Studies, if we're talking about Black Studies, it's good to know how we got here as a discipline.
Man, your sound is shaky again, but I did hear what you said. Right. So that's one of my. That was my go-to. I didn't bring it, did I? Oh, yes, here it is. That was my go-to, for the Black studies. And there have been another the Black, the movement, Black Studies movement. And there have been there are a number of other texts that have come out since Fabio Rojas. If y'all can see it, you probably can't since I'm on small screen. So I'm excited about it, but I haven't had a chance to read yet. Just came out this year. Abdul Al-Kalimat has written a book called The History of Black Studies, and I definitely want to get to it. And so what I will say is that actually I didn't have like Black Studies, studies of Black studies
Yep.
as a part of the 25, as a part of the undergraduate. I certainly had that as part of the master's program. I just wanted to say
Yep.
that, and actually wanted to get a mention of this new book called The History of Black Studies by Abdul Kalimat into the mix. Having said that, like I say, once again, since we got a sort of time constraint here as well, I'm willing to just and this is still a good and useful book, From Black Power to Black Studies, so I have no problems with that. And since y'all want to put it on the list, I'm like I said, this stuff would matter a little bit more when there were 4 of us. So with the number just being 3, it's a little kind of, the dynamics a little different. But who needs to vote on that? Brandon, you just went out.
No, I'm here.
You
When you
good?
say I'm here, I think it's a really, really important conversation to what you just mentioned, because we don't have that kind of history of the development of Black studies in there. To my thinking, that's certainly a part of a graduate study program.
Are you pushing back? Are we
No,
voting it off?
No. I'm just saying that it's an important inclusion to have. Whether or not that is the essential text on the conversation that we should include, I think that's debatable. But I think that particular aspect of Black studies is missing from our conversation thus far.
We'll put it in there. Jakia, you got 4 more.
All right. I would also like to add, I just had it. I would also like to add, I would like to put the new Jim Crow in there.
What are your thoughts? I bet you McCormick will vote for this, won't you? Oh, he's thinking about it. You might get you a veto here.
I'm not sure if I vote for it for this particular canon. I think it is crucial reading. You have to talk about mass incarceration to talk about the contemporary Black experience. You got to talk about that, and its evolution from enslavement, and the contemporary conversation that we're having about abolition in the carceral state. So I think it is an essential line of thought. Is that text essential to the canon? I can be persuaded, right, Jakia? So make an argument for it right quick, and let me hear you. Let me see if we agree.
You made your own argument. This is the book that's going from slavery.
So we got a yes or no from you, McCormick. You can't do no more words. Only word you can give me now is yes or no. That's all you got. Those are the only choices. Yes or no.
I'll say yeah. I'll say yes, because it also brings a legal scholar's voice into the mix, of which we currently don't have.
Jakia, what else you got?
But some of us are brave.
I think that's a useful text. Here's why I would want to push back against it. Because I want to have the Black woman in there, and I think if we have a list of 25, I don't know if there should be both. So I would be pushing back against it, because I'd be trying to get Toni Cade Bambara's The Black Woman in there. What do you think? Give me a counter argument. She froze again.
We can't put both.
Well, I'm saying on a list of 25, I don't want both of them. That's my argument. So we just got too much ground to cover.
Okay. Well, you have the power to veto. So.
Well, everybody's got the power to veto, but can you? So you would have to say, hey, no, we need really a number of texts to cover this territory. You could say that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that, like, Words of Fire, Some of Us Are Brave, like, they offer different perspectives. Yeah, Words of Fire is already there.
I'm gonna push back. That confirms my no vote, which is no disrespect to the text, but I got to get Toni Cade Bambara's The Black Woman in, or at least I got to try to get it in. And so I'm voting that one down on the theory of coverage. On the theory we're trying to create a list that not just responsible for what we put down, but also presents some sort of coverage of our conception of the Black studies canon there as well. Well, that's a veto. So you got 2 more? Do you have 2 more?
That's fine. Yeah, I don't know. But I would also like to Africa and Africans in the making of the Atlantic world.
I don't
We'll
know
add
anything.
some history here.
Who wrote that? I don't know this. John Thornton. I'm completely unfamiliar with this.
Make your case, Jakia.
No, so right now the list does not have a lot of history here.
Yep.
And then also there's not a lot of connection to Africa in this list. So considering ground, we have the humanities, we have the social sciences, we have legal studies, and it's about time we add some history to it as well.
What do you think, boss man?
I'm not opposed.
Oh,
What
man.
number are we at right now?
Oh, it's not very high. We ain't even up to, yeah, we each up to 10.
We just at 10. Let's add it.
You know what? I'll go along. I'll go along. Do you have one more? I think you're 5, so you got one more. Jakia, one more. And while
Black Against Empire, the history and politics of the Black Panther Party, because I love the Black Panther Party, and I feel like we wouldn't be here without the Black Panther Party. So they need to be given some special attention. And I will also say that when Black Power to Black Studies gave a lot of attention to SNP. So this kind of supplements that in paying attention to the Black Panther Party. It supplements.
The Black Panther Party is important. I also do feel that they are, absolutely, what's the word? That's the right way of saying it. They are vastly overrepresented in the literature of Black radical movements of that era. And so while they are important, and I actually have not read this text, there was a time, but it's long ago now, 25 years or more, where I really was completely familiar with pretty much everything that had been published. I haven't been really keeping up like that over the past 25 years. I just wanted to say, I don't really go.
I'm not disagreeing that when this dude is real loud at this coffee shop. I'm not disagreeing that they are overrepresented in a number of texts, but as far as this list is concerned, they aren't represented at all. Even this era isn't represented.
Yeah, that's true. This era is completely well outside of Black Fire, which is art. You're right. This era is unrepresented. Let me see.
Yeah.
Before I agree with you, let me see. Yeah. I'm not persuaded because I'd be trying to push some of my stuff that covers the same time period. I'm not persuaded. But since this is a collective enterprise and since time is getting tight, McCormick's got to go any second now.
I was just about to say, I'm going to have to jump off of here. And unfortunately, y'all going to have to duke it out amongst yourselves to get to the 25. Please keep me informed. I look forward to coming back and listening to the rest of the recording of this. But as you can see, I got my Howard Dad sweatshirt on. I'm here in Washington, D.C., and this is Parents Weekend at Howard. Our daughter is a freshman here, so we got to get over to the campus and connect with her.
All right.
So we're going to have to leave you. But look, Kwame, I really appreciate this conversation. And I'm glad that we've been able to have it. And we got to continue this and do more of this kind of thing within the department. And thanks for everybody who logged in and contribute to the conversation. I hope that there's a robust Q&A. I already saw some things in the chat that are worth conversation there. So
okay.
I hope y'all have a chance to check that out. But thanks again. Good to see you, Jakia. And I'll see y'all back in Louisville when we get back.
All right. Have a good trip and all that. See you later.
See ya.
All right. And then there were two. It's just you and me now. The two people whose lists were the most dissimilar. So we should have fun over this last little bit of time. So I haven't been looking at the chat. Amina, is there some stuff you think we need to? Are there some questions or issues or something right now that look like we?
Not yet. If folks have any questions, you can send them through the chat. I believe you can also send them through the Q&A function as the conversation continues, and you'll get some answers, hopefully.
Okay, cool. I just wanted to check on that because when Brandon mentioned, I was like, you know what, I really have not checked in. All right, Jakia. So now it's just you and me, and we got, what, 13 more items left? So, yeah, and each of us have veto power. It really is a little different. I don't even know if we should even do this with just a two-person thing. Now it's just two of us. Maybe we should just we'll just talk. Yeah, I don't think we're gonna, because I want to talk about the 10 item list. You and me, let's talk about that 10 item list in a couple bits. But let me see. Well, I'm trying to make this a conversation. In terms of my list. All right. So, what's the stuff that's most distinctive and most different about this list? Let me just put my 5 in, even though it's just you and me, and we'll see. All right. So I definitely would want to put Maurice Conde's novel about West Africa, Segu, on the list. Did you read that? Are you familiar with it?
Years ago. But I would support that.
Yeah. All right. Let me see. What else would I want to put on here? Yeah, I mean, it's just you and me. I mean, how much disagreement are we really going to have there? Have you seen Sugarcane Alley?
We're best friends. Of course, I only heard of it because of you. So yes, I have. I'm pretty sure you let me borrow it.
That's possible. Actually. Wait a minute. So, all right. So, yeah, it's just you and me, man. All right, you didn't have anything on my list. So let me just. All right, what else? Let me see. And then we're going to go to the 10 item list. That's what we're going to do. Have you read The Street by Ann Petrie or Petrie?
I have not.
So it's a novel. 1946? It actually was a. What's the word?
Do it.
No, it was a hit in this day, actually. But it's a story. What's the name? Well, I mean, so in 1946, for a Black author to actually have what's considered a best-selling novel, what I mean to say is the sum total of that prior to 1946 is somewhere in the vicinity of 4 or 5, right? Richard Wright earlier had a really big, and really Richard Wright, anyway, yeah. Maybe I should stop there as well. But I'm glad when I was a freshman in college, I took a Black literature course, and I'm pretty sure, Professor Selwyn Cujo. I think that's where I read this book there, The Street by Ann Petrie. Anyway, 1946, Ludi Johnson. So she is a classic figure in African American literature. This story is right. It's in New York, set in New York, and she's this sister. She ended up married this lame dude. They had a child, and so she had to go out and fend for herself. So it's the story of how does a single mom in New York City try to make it, or what are the many and various obstacles that would be in such a person's way. So as a portrait of Black urban life in the middle 20th century, man, I would regard as indispensable, and I would definitely put it over Richard Wright's novels from that standpoint. I'm actually not even a fan of Native Son is important historically, but I'd want people to read The Street, pretty much 99 times out of 100 between the two of them as well. And I guess there is some degree of comparison. They're considered naturalistic novels as well. So anyway, you can see my list. I tried to put a lot of humanities, a lot of literature in there. I'd be wanting to push for that one as well. But like I say, it's just two of us. What are we going to do? Push back against each other's choices?
Not against my best friend. But if you choose that book over over Richard Wright, I didn't really care for that book anyway, and I have my issues with Richard Wright just as an individual. Yeah. So I'm trusting your judgment on this. So I wouldn't push back on that alone. You critique Richard Wright in the similar ways that I would. So yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's just the two of us. So we sit here, like I say, neither of us had any lists in common. Let me see. The only thing I would do before we turn to the 10 item list is, let me see if there's anything here that I would feel the need to persuade you of. Okay. All right. What about it? So this is the one that I figured people would push back against. Since it's really for a couple of generations now, Americans have no familiarity with that great art known as jazz music. Then one function in my mind, then of a Black Studies department that's really trying to certainly expose people to the range of Black experience, Black expression, Black achievement, and such. So, given the fact that there's absolutely no exposure to jazz, so the item that I would want to put on the list is we have to create. Well, I would create it, of course. Of course, it would be me. We got to familiarize them with a significant body of jazz, and I'm doing that not by having them read any books, but like just having them listen to a whatever, 30, 50, 100 item, whatever we might agree upon, but a jazz playlist. I want to put that on the essential Black Studies major list. So give me some pushback since you don't listen to jazz neither.
What you mean I don't listen to jazz? I play the alto and soprano saxophone.
Oh, I didn't know that. And I was just, I was throwing that out there provocatively. And what do you know? What do you know?
No.
Sure. Do you know who Eric Dolphy is? Do you know who Eric Dolphy is?
Of course I do. And I love jazz.
Well, damn, we closer than I even thought, man. We already thought we were. Tight. Damn, you know who Eric Dolphy is. Oh, my God. Jakia. Oh, my God. That means you know who McCoy Tyner is, too, then.
I played the saxophone.
Oh my God!
And my era, I would say I respect bebop. Didn't really care for it too much, but respected and even played it quite a bit.
Okay.
But then moved into obviously Coltrane. I've listened to a lot of different jazz artists in different.
Well, you're probably not going to push back. You're probably not going to push. You're probably going to let this in then.
Yeah, the only thing that I would say is that I think that it is important to listen to jazz, but I also think that the history of jazz is also necessary, because I know when I was in band, they never talked about the history of jazz, but they had me up at 6 o'clock every morning playing, Yeah. So I think that the playlist is essential, but I also think that there needs to be some type of discussion, some reading, as a documentary.
Oh, sure.
In addition to that, so that they can contextualize the significance of jazz, not only then, but also now, because jazz has influenced so many different genres.
I'm going to, we'll see, but I have in terms of doing this, this series, this panel series, Conversations in Black. So I've told a couple of people this, that I'm going to try to put one together called "Why Does Black Studies Hate Jazz?" What do you think?
I don't know if that's a fair question to ask, but you can ask it.
Oh, why is it not? Okay, all right. Well, just for a second, then we'll kind of go to like the 10 item list. I think it's eminently. Obviously, it's designed to be provocative, but how is it unfair?
I think because to hate something, you have to be actively against it. And I think that they're generally just a large cloud of ignorance as it relates to not only jazz, but a lot of other music types, right? Like we have classes on hip hop, but a lot of those songs were sampled off of jazz, from jazz musicians.
Mm-hmm.
That conversation needs to be, the conversation needs to be nuanced. And they might even have those conversations in the hip hop class, which means that they don't hate jazz. They just aren't focusing on jazz.
Okay,
right?
so I got you. No, so you're pushing back on the semantics. I got you.
Yeah, that's basically it.
Well, but the phraseology is actually, important in terms of getting some attention. No, I hear you. Obviously, I know that it is provocative, and I know there's probably, I'm a couple people going, I don't hate jazz, and I'm a Black Studies. But like your general point, like the complete absence of it as a reference point, as an item in the journals, in the conferences, in course offerings and such like that. So that thing that you call ignorance, yes, I would phrase it like that, but just for the purpose of illustrating the fact that, obviously the upshot of such a conversation would be, hey, should we be paying more attention to this? But yeah. Anyway, that's a future thing. And so, all right, it's just you and me now. So I guess we should talk about a top 10 list. Let's look at yours. Let's look
Sounds
at your,
good.
yeah. And all right. So the stuff, if y'all, the stuff that is in, what's the word, in bold, this is Jakia's top 10 list. Now, when you did your list of 10, were you answering the question of what all Black people should read, or the related question of essential text for a Black studies minor?
I was thinking more of the central text. And again, I was also thinking about more breadth than anything else. Now, I also like to say that I put Souls of Black Folk and Up in Slavery because
Yeah.
a lot of people attack Booker T. Washington, which I'm like, that's fine, but then they don't attack Du Bois. And I'm like, that's don't get me started on that man. Which McCourage must have remembered some debates in his class when he said it when we first started. But we need to engage since Du Bois attacked Washington, right? And so the people haven't read anything from Washington. How would they know the context of what Du Bois is talking about to be able to engage in any kind of truthful discussion? So I think that those need to be together. That's why I put those together.
No. That's right on. That's right on. I mean, it hardly, yeah, we got to kind of abandon the scheme of actually like voting. But I will say, so we'll just talk about our list. That's what we'll do. But yeah, I hear what you say, but that definitely wouldn't make my list. I already talked about, I don't know if you were with us when I said, well, Souls of Black Folk is, yeah, it ain't indispensable. It's important, but it ain't indispensable.
I mean,
So
to be fair, I don't even like the book. To be fair, I don't like it.
I understand.
When I assign it, my students are confused, and I say, but I would say like when I teach this, and I just have them read a chapter, and they talk about how confused they are, and I say, good, that shows you exactly who he wants his audience to be, and it's not the average person,
That's an excellent point.
right?
That's
So
an
like
excellent point.
this is how we get to understand these scholars is by reading their work because Du Bois is cited so much. So go ahead and read Du Bois because I know in plenty of other classes you'll hear of him. So now you read them and you get to know who the person is when you read, their most famous contributions.
Okay, I heard that. What? So you put several items on your 10-item list that are like on my like graduate list that didn't make my cut of the essential 10. And like I say, in terms of like making these lists for all of us, these are not statements about like the worthiness of text that didn't make our list. So anyway, just saying that point. But I mean, you mentioned a couple of my favorites here. So Sheikh Anta Jacques, like I say, I had him on my master's degree list, which we certainly are not going to get a chance to talk about today. Hey, well, I don't know. I'd like to continue this, but we can't. I mean, for a different session, but we can't do it. I don't want to do it if it's just going to be you and me. I mean, you and me is good, but that's just not a whole, public conversation. We need some more people in it. Anyway, blah blah blah. So Jacques and Walter Rodney also. I had those on my master's degree list there as well. There's more to say about the autobiography. I'll tell you what. We'll look at my list in a second. But your item number 22. Let's talk about that for half a second. Actually, there's something else. I want to talk about that and 2000 seasons. Love to talk about that. So you got Crisis of the Negro Intellectual, a historical analysis of Black leadership, that legendary, even sensational book from 1967 by Harold Cruz on your top 10 list. So you put it there, so you obviously have said, let me offer my commentary. Man, you talk about confusing, and my thoughts are, I mean, I think that book certainly was an important book in its time and very interesting, but there's no way, like all the issues that he takes up under there and renders his opinions about which are in many cases, questionable, in some cases actually wrong, you'd have to spend all semester just really unpacking it. I mean, there are sections which are beautiful, and I understand why. And the first time I read it, the first couple of times I read it, I really dug it. But there's a reason why you could probably compile, there's probably more critical essays and remarks about crisis of the Negro intellectual in his day than there were about Manning Marable's Malcolm X book. And that book spawned two different collections of critical essays. Well, one is all critical, one is kind of mostly critical, but it's got some that are just more like neutral. Even Nell Irvin Payton even said it's a great book and even replaces the autobiography of Malcolm X. I mean, Nell Irvin Payton said that. All right, I'm getting beside the point. So the reason why Harold Cruz couldn't make my list is I would have to assign that in a graduate program about like Black intellectual history, or even more narrowly, 1960s, Black theories or something like that. Because he tries to cover all this ground, and the real truth is, he wasn't all that right about too much of it. He was interesting, but he really wasn't ultimately all that right about all. So that's my
And
comment.
I think that's okay though. And I'm gonna tell you why. It's because some of the conversations are really about what was significant in the time, right? So I think that with some of these books, the context in which we discuss them is really what matters. So for
Yep.
me, some of these books, I'm like, no. I just assign them so that we can argue in class, right? I want y'all to sit here and say, this person is stupid. Yes, please tell me why, right? And then I want you to bring in other sources and show what the arguments actually were during this time. So I think that book is adding to the discussion to help individuals understand the various viewpoints that were occurring in a specific time, right? And like, this is just one of those. Not saying that I necessarily agree with it, but this is just one. And this is, but people love it, right? Why do people love it? That adds a whole nother historical and socio-cultural context as well.
Yeah, no, I heard that. Yeah. I mean, it's a book that I mean, for myself, I could like I said, I could imagine assigning, but I'd have to have like, I don't know, like 4 weeks. 4 weeks
Yeah.
just to
You know,
focus on that.
same thing,
Yeah.
like Afrocentricity. I have so many issues with Malefia Santi's idea of Afrocentricity.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but it is important if you in Black Studies and don't know who Malefia Santi is, then you aren't in Black Studies.
Yeah. So yeah, I
It's like
think.
one of those things.
Mhm. Yeah, so for me, once again, I have something about him, maybe that title, I'm not sure, but in the graduate program. And I don't even think I have it in the master's program. I think I have it in the doctoral program. From my standpoint, it was at that doctoral level that one really needs to have an awareness of these different sort of camps of theory within Black studies. To me, that's not a requirement for an undergraduate to be conversant with. Oh, there's this camp, there's that camp, there's that camp. And for my sense, not even at the master's level, but the doctor, right? The doctor is supposed to be an expert in the field, and so you better know, about these important influences, whether or not that has any sort of direct role in any scholarship you might be doing here with us. So this is just some comment on
See,
that.
I think about it a little differently
Yeah.
in that. So I don't assign the whole book to Afrocentricity. I assign a chapter to my undergrads. But I took a student to NCBS and she knew Asante, she knew Karinga, right? I'm like, oh, remember you read that? Oh, that's who that is, right? So I'm also thinking like, if you're gonna be in this Black studies space and these people are actually here, you should know who they are.
That's a good point. That's
That's
a
also what
good
I
point.
was thinking about engaging with students as well, what that means and what I would like you to know. Because these conversations are going to happen at the conference and in other NCBS or Black studies spaces. So just to add some familiarity out so that they can engage outside of the classroom as well. Not necessarily that I think you need to know all these theories, but some of these people you need to know just because
you will see them.
That's a good point. That's a good point. The other thing on your list before we look at mine for a couple of minutes and then wrap up, actually. So even though this didn't make my cut until the graduate program, I still was enormously tickled to see my man Aikwe Arma's 2000 Seasons on your list. I love that book. I love that book. And like I said, it didn't make my cut for the undergraduates just because, well, just, hey, tight list. But absolutely. In fact, I do. I think I was able to actually teach that in a graduate class within the last year or so. And anyway, a couple of years maybe. Anyway, 2000 Seasons. Man, I'm trying to figure out how to organize. I haven't thought this through. Trying to figure out a way to organize a session, around that book, but I haven't quite figured out a way to actually have an interesting conversation about a novel that very few people have read, for public consumption. But I want to. Anyway, I love that book. I'm so happy you put it on your list. What is my 10 item? Anyway, so we see your 10 items. Black Jacobins, once again, if I didn't say it before, I got that one in the graduate program, actually. Now, Neocolonialism by Kwame Nkrumah actually didn't even make my cut at all. But of course, Nkrumah's a critical figure. So, all right, my turn. I've talked about some of this stuff already, actually. We don't need to talk about the autobiography. I really already talked about the Eyes on the Prize earlier. So I think I actually talked about this stuff earlier when I was introducing the list. So my 10 would be Malcolm, Eyes on the Prize, Negroes with Guns, The Black Woman, Celia Slade. I think I talked about all these, so I don't even need to talk about it much. There's a River by Vincent Harding, Sugarcane Alley, the movie about colonialism in the Caribbean in the 1930s. Yeah, I talked about all these. So you see what my 10 item list would kind of look like. And so
Yeah, I would say the world in Africa. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, well, actually, I'm trying to look at it. No, I ain't got too much. Yeah, I guess I got 3 humanities. I got, one film, and then Lorraine Hansberry and Maurice Condé. So I got 3 humanities, 3 civil rights, Black Power era, 4. Anyway, you were going to say something?
No, I was saying like the world in Africa was one that I considered, right? I obviously have my issues with Du Bois just in general, but also
Sure.
I was like, man, if there's some work about the continent, I wanted to have African-born or Africa-born scholars as the ones writing it. I find that very, very important, right?
Mhm.
And I think that it also adds to again adds to that nuance of Black studies and being global Africans, right? Being African people and recognizing um, that everything cannot be from the West, even if we are Black, right? That's the reason I didn't add that book on there, even though I know it was important in many respects.
Understood. So what on your list, is anything on your list representing like Africans or writing about Africa?
I mean, that's why I have Nkrumah on there a bit. There's not a huge discussion on Africa from this list. Like I
Maybe.
said, because since it's Black studies, um, this one is more U.S. based,
Gotcha.
and then I have scholars from around the world who, from multiple countries who are discussing, X, Y, and Z. So like besides they came before Columbus and neocolonialism, and most of the scholars would be from the Caribbean
Yeah, no,
or from
man.
other parts of the world. Yeah.
No, man. Ivan Van Soda, they came before Columbus. I remember reading that back in 78 or so.
And actually, I misspoke. I meant to say the African origins of civilization. That was
Oh,
actually
Sheikh
No, I
Anta
misspoke.
Diop. Yes, man. We have a
I'm
Sheikh
like,
Anta
it came
Diop.
out there.
Oops.
No, go ahead, make the announcement.
Oh no, it's just to say that one of our, I think our undergraduates student committee, a student, what organization is called the Sheikh Anta Diop Society. Although here in Louisville, Kentucky, they call it Diop, the Diop Society. But that's another story for another day because I look on the clock and there's 4 minutes left. So we're going to actually just wrap up, actually. I enjoyed it, man. Yeah, I won't make a complaint. I enjoyed it. I'm very glad. It's always excellent to see you and speak with you, Dr. Marie. And yeah. I hope that you will continue to participate in our our PAS and Friends Conversations in Black. From my personal standpoint, you are a constituent member of said entity. And I'm glad you were able to make time all the way over there in Accra, Ghana, to actually talk to us. So that's great. Thank you to everyone who, listened, checked it out. What do I want to say? By way of getting on out of here, I want to remind you, 3 weeks from now, we'll be doing it again. The conversation I can say that if I concentrate. Elections, ethnicity, and empire. Thoughts on the 2024 presidential race. 3 weeks from today at the exact same time from 1 to 3. Keep this in your hats for what is that? 5 months down the road. We're going to do this Malcolm X blowout on Saturday, February the 22nd. And we might have more. We will have more eventually. But anyway, there's more to come. Thanks for checking out the inaugural version of PAS and Friends, Conversations in Black. So thank you to everyone. Before did anybody have a question or anything resolved before we roll on out of here?
I see a hand raised. Oni, do you have a question that you would like to put in the chat, or is that not for a question? If so, you can drop it in the chat. Oh no, all good. If there aren't any questions, then no, I think that is all. I know there will be a recording of this, so people who are interested in that, you will have that sent out.
Okay. All right. Cool. Well, yeah. Thank you to everyone. Jakia, any last words as we close this bad boy on out?
Thanks for having me. It was great seeing all of y'all and engaging in this conversation.
Yeah. For real. All right, cool. Well, I'm going to say goodbye to everyone. And once again, thanks for checking it out. And we hope to get the, We hope to get the recording up on YouTube soon. So I'm going to hit end. All right. See everybody.